that the cultivar of Merlot embodies a remarkable story of redemption. Because for a very long time, Merlot did not even know who her mother was, and in fact suffered the shame and embarrassment of being named after those little blackbirds that used to pick on her at harvest time. Perhaps compounding this rather complicated domestic situation was the fact that Merlot's father, Cabernet Franc, was prodigiously promiscuous and had at least 4 children with different partner vines. It was in fact only in the year 2000 that ampelographers discovered who Merlot's mother was. And she turned out to be an anonymous, although very easy on the eye, vine that was grown for the most part for ornamental and decorative purposes in front of houses in the southwest of France. One might say she was the viticultural version of a would-be trophy wife, although unsuccessful because she had never fully snagged a matrimonial patron. As her story developed, we discover that, ironically, or perhaps predictably, this anonymous cultivar had suffered the same fate as her child Merlot, in that no one had ever bothered to take the time to give her a name. The psychological damage that no doubt comes from the lack of an attentive caregiver explains in some way how easily she managed to abandon Merlot and thereby perpetuate the cycle of parental neglect. Fortunately, some well-meaning and selfless ampelographers took time to get to know this vine and to give her the adoptive name of Magdeleine Noire des Charentes. First of all, because they discovered she was from the region of Charente in southwest France. And second of all, because she was in the habit of giving up her ripe fruit rather quickly, so that she was always ready to be harvested by the 22nd of July, the feast day of Mary Magdalene. And at this point, psychologists will again be nodding their heads, because that tendency to give up one's ripe fruit fairly quickly is consistent with someone who has suffered a distinct lack of caregiving parental authority. So to conclude, Merlot is the child of a partnership between a roguish philanderer, Cabernet Franc, and a beautiful but neglected vine called Magdeleine Noire des Charentes. The happy ending to this story is that through the tireless work of ampelographers, Merlot was reconnected with her mother, and in fact thereby reconnected to her extended family, and was able to find connection with cultivars like Arborio. The relevance of all this, of course, is that today's HanDrinksSolo wine of the day is the Oldenburg CL Red Blend, which is a Bordeaux-style blend fronted by Merlot, and it is vinified by winemaker Nick van AARDE. Nick van AARDE is probably most famous for the work that he did at Warwick Estate, where he delivered some truly sublime Cabernet Francs and also their Trilogy Bordeaux blend. Now, Warwick has been an institution for a very, very long time. But when Nick came on board, he really did take their Cabernet Franc and their Trilogy Bordeaux blend beyond Thunderdome. It was then in 2018 that the owner of Oldenburg, Andre van der Spey, headhunted Nick to come on board at Oldenburg, not with the express purpose of delivering some epic commercial success, but rather with the aim of delivering genuine wines of quality that communicated this exquisite little pocketed terroir that Oldenburg has in the middle of Banghoek. The belief was that profitability would naturally follow excellence. Now, as we know, this isn't always the case, but the consumer does benefit from this sentiment nevertheless. As of 2023, Nick van AARDE has been at Oldenburg for 5 years, and so he's had plenty of time to find his feet and to think about the future. So I took time to ask him what excited him about said future. I was very intrigued to hear that his answer revolved around a white cultivar. Nick is very excited about the Chardonnay plantings at Oldenburg, and the estate has invested a lot in the future of Chardonnay in Banghoek. So while we're dealing with Merlot and Cabernet Franc today, put a bookmark on the Oldenburg Chardonnay page in your mental wine journal. Also, the idea of leaning into Oldenburg's white wines may make a little more sense once we've unpacked some information about their terroir. Now, when talking about Oldenburg's terroir, I find it easiest to reference DC comic characters in order to explain my point. Now, in the DC comic universe, you have 3 rough categories of characters, right? You have the aliens, like Superman or Wonder Woman, and we can ignore them largely for now. Then the second category is that of the super rich. So we have Batman or Green Arrow or even Lex Luthor, if you want to include the villains. And the third category we have are the hapless, clumsy, but super powered. And you might reference the Flash in this category, or the tragically monikered elongated man. But what we need to note here is that no character ever straddles those zones. You're either super rich and suave, or you're super powered but clumsy and dorky. You can't have both. That just wouldn't be fair. But now, holding that in mind, let's go back to Oldenburg, because the truth is, Oldenburg has both. Oldenburg breaks the comic tradition, and it's just not fair. Not only do they have a savant winemaker, Nick van Aarde, but they also have an exquisite little patch of terroir. Honestly, this place is like Narnia in springtime melded with the Garden of Eden. To further unpack the details of this insanely picturesque little piece of the planet, Oldenburg sits within a rather steep mountain valley, so it has long mountain shadows which help to cool things off on some of the hotter summer afternoons. Also, in the middle of their property, they have a rather unusual round hill, which has slopes facing every direction, which means their viticultural team can plant cultivars on pretty much any aspect that they want to. Thirdly, they sit up at between 300 and 400 meters above sea level, which only intensifies this climatic scenario that I just outlined. The end result of all of this is that Oldenburg and Banghoek are, on any given day, 3 to 4 degrees cooler than the rest of Stellenbosch Central. In fact, sometimes it's too cool. During autumn, when fermentations are on the go, Nick van Aarde and his team have to roll barrels outside into the morning sunlight in order to warm them up to make sure that fermentations don't get stuck because it's too cold in the cellar. That is a very unusual occurrence for South African wine producers. To give this pithy little anecdote some context, wine producers in places like Paarl or the Swartland spend a huge amount of resources and financial input on air conditioning and temperature control in order to fight against the heat. As per the rationale outlined above, Oldenburg have for a long time professed the double entendre of Banghoek being cooler than Stellenbosch. But now, instead of muttering it out of the side of their mouths in hushed tones with a little bit of nudge nudge and wink wink, they've progressed to putting this message in print on their wine labels, albeit in code. For those of you who habitually spaced out in maths class and may need this explained to you, the V on its side is a less than symbol. CL are the letters that go on the license plates of Stellenbosch vehicles. And so combined, the message we're getting is that Banghoek is one of the coolest parts of Stellenbosch. But putting maths aside, when we get into the glass and give this a sniff, well, unsurprisingly, it does have a slightly leafier character than some of the other Bordeaux blends that we have explored this month. And that is because this wine is more than half Merlot. Merlot is a cultivar that is often characterized by notes of thyme or oregano or mint or even eucalyptus, and sometimes these herbal greener elements can be at the expense of the fruit elements. Luckily, in this particular wine, it's not the case, because there are those Mediterranean herbs and mint elements going, but with those, there's a delightful, fresh sort of cherry candy thing going on, as well as slightly riper, deeper black mulberry notes. Now, those lovely lighter cherry candy elements are almost certainly as a result of the fact that winemaker Nick van Aarde leaves the Merlot component as whole berries, whereas he crushes the rest of the cultivars. Now, when you leave something as whole berries, you don't tear the skins, you generally treat them more gently and therefore extract less. And so in the case of Merlot, you not only get less of those herbal qualities that we talked about, but you get more of those heady cherry candy-like aromas, which are the result of semi-carbonic maceration, which only really happens in a whole berry context. And finally, there is a touch of pencil shavings and also a little bit of cocoa dusting. And this makes sense because the wine was fermented in a combination of new and old oak for 16 months. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. But if you have any questions about Banghoek or Nick van Aarde or Oldenburg, then drop them in the comment section and I will get back to you. And if you enjoyed the video, then support us on Patreon and subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo YouTube channel, where we publish at least 6 videos each month talking about things like unusual cultivars, wine history, wine science, and some of the rising winemaking stars that are coming out of the dynamic South African wine movement.